Yeah, it's rich in bubbly goodness.
Do you remember when you lost your passion for this work?
I invited another friend. I hope that's okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Reina Creole, bringing you that spice to sci-fi and pop culture analysis. And welcome to a live airing of our after school special series where we just basically set aside some time to just kick back and talk about, our favorite geek stuff. So, of course, I got my co-host, Fat Steven, and our special guest returning, and we're so glad, Meyer Burnett. How are you guys doing?
Thanks for bringing me back. I had so much fun last time. It's good to see you both.
Oh, likewise, dude.
Robert, you make me question my masculinity. Those glasses are awesome.
People love these glasses.
Awesome.
Usually I make terrible fashion choices, but somehow, I think these glasses I'm keeping them.
You've been on YouTube long enough. You've seen some bad fashion choices, so I think you're okay with a pair of glasses.
Yeah, I think actually one of the things I long to have is a stylist. If my channel gets big enough, I can actually hire a stylist to, find suits for me and clothes for me. And maybe I can get sponsors to dress me because I can't do it myself. Clearly.
I actually think it would be pretty easy to get a stylist for you.
I don't know, man. I mean, my girlfriend Elizabeth is actually she does hair. She's a Vidal Sassoon trained hairstylist. So she cuts my hair. She recently cut my hair, but it's kind of a mess right now. But yes, so that's good. But I mean, basically I would love Tom Ford to sponsor my channel.
Only
wear Tom Ford.
I love Tom Ford. I got too much Tom Ford makeup that cost me a grip.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, not only is it expensive, but I would have to work out for 6 months due to an Avengers workout program to get my body into a place where I can actually fit in Tom Ford clothes. Because, in order to look great in those kind of clothes, you have to be in physically pretty good condition.
Yeah.
That's why I reach out to companies that make girdles, because at least then I'm not going to feel bad and they're not going to be like, yikes, I shouldn't have done that. It looks like sausage rolls leaking out everywhere.
Oh, the perils of high fashion. You love it, right? But it's just I'm not going on a diet forever try to fit to that stuff. Oh gosh, well, folks, you guys are here with us. We're going to be talking season 1 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But before we get started with our special guest, let me go ahead and welcome the chat. So we have the awesome one. It says evening afternooner. Well, I guess afternoon here, evening, I guess if you're on BST, British Standard Time, or whatever, over in Europe. So I love this time because we can just kind of get everybody. I think it's no, it's a little bit after lunch where you are, Rob, right?
Yeah. Well, a little. Yeah, it's the afternoon. It's when you take your siesta.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I remember when I worked in LA, it's I get this call and I'm just Mom, it's lunchtime. Oh, well, it's dinner time here. Never forget get the time right.
I know.
It's crazy. Hello, Snore to Poopus Q Burr says hello, humans and other critters in the chat. Well, glad you're here with us. And we have Zachary at 315 says howdy, Lorena, Fat Steven, and Robert. And we have Black Superwoman here too, says I'm live here for once. Well, girl, I'm glad you're here with us. I love your comments on my video.
Look at the hair.
I know, isn't the hair crazy? I love it.
It looks like a really, I'm not going to start, hopefully I'm not saying it looks like a really comfy pillow. Like she can just lay her head down and she doesn't worry about memory foam ever. It just looks like I've never seen it. Please don't cancel me.
Wasn't that a joke in Austin Powers movie that Beyonce was in? It's like they were underwater and she got out of the water, like her hair was really tight across her head, and she was like this, and it was back out.
Oh my god,
it was really cool. Oh, let's see. Hey, Shellback, you don't see anything? Is YouTube giving you issues again? Because we can see the stream, but
maybe his monitor's off.
I don't know. I don't know. Try research refreshing the screen, see if that works. You should see us because we are indeed live. And Wookie in Exile says hi, Lorena, and all those lovely, beautiful hearts. Thank you. And we have Randy Scribner Jr. who's here, says hi, everyone. And there's Canadian Spider-Man who's basically saying Robert Meyer Burnett, wave heart.
Hello, Canadian Spider-Man.
Right.
I got my Green Goblin back here, so watch out.
Ooh,
watch out.
Really wait. Oh, that's the movie one.
Yeah, that's a recent addition. It's a third party. It's actually a really well done third party Green Goblin on the glider. It's really nice.
I had one quick question. You don't have a Michael Jackson hot toy anywhere in the collection?
You know what? I did. I had the Michael Jackson Thriller 2-pack. And
wow.
I had a friend of mine that desperately wanted it, and I actually gifted it to him for his birthday. And what I had bought, I was going to do a display because I had the figures from Shaun of the Dead, and then I had a lot of figures that Sideshow did of zombies, and I wanted to do a whole big zombie display with Michael Jackson leading the charge. But
oh my gosh!
Although Hot Toys did make a Michael Jackson from Bad.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, and so now I've become obsessed with the idea of I have this John Lennon figure. You can see it back there, the 6-scale figure, and I just I have a Jimi Hendrix figure that hasn't arrived yet, but it's incredible. The likeness is incredible. And then I just ordered a Freddie Mercury figure.
Oh, dude.
And so I don't know why I got in like this. I have a weird fixation on action figure chairs, 6-scale. I don't know why. I love action figures that come with chairs.
Different.
But now I know, right? Now I want to build the ultimate super group in 6-scale. And just like, and this would be like the stage. So, and my most eagerly, and now I've got to go back and get one of Michael Jackson from Bad, or get the Thriller. But I'd love to get. I don't know if they made. I think they did. I want to get Michael Jackson, Billie Jean era Michael Jackson in a 6-scale figure.
Yeah, if you're gonna do on Bad though, you have to get the Weird Al Yankovic custom one where I'm fat.
I could do that too. What I really want is somebody to make a Prince 6-scale figure because I'm a Prince fanatic.
Cool. Well, hey, Wendy Baker. She says, "Howdy, hi everybody." I'm continue in the chat here. Let's see. And we have Memes of Destruction says, "Hey guys, what's going on? Glad to see you here, Memes." And we have, oh, that's funny. Green Goblin is less trouble than Hobgoblin.
It's true.
Hey Kai, so good to see you here. He says, "Hey all." Pod Racing Palpatine is here and says, "Hello there. I am the Senate," waving with the thumb up. Absolutely. Let's see. You need ABBA. The ABBA group.
and Rob, check that link. I think they make a custom Purple Rain Prince 1/6.
And hey, Jedi 6, and thank you so much for being a member of my channel. It says RMB, the world's foremost collector of action figure chairs.
I know. That's like, well, I don't know what kind of a distinction that is, but I certainly love them. I don't know why.
That's an interesting niche. It's like I want to collect,
Wow, this is really good.
Yeah, I just Googled it in. I don't know if they're still making it, but you can always reach out to them, I guess.
Which one is it? 60? Oh,
I think he's doing that face going, "I love that," and he's like, "That's the face of F you, Steven. I have to spend $400."
That's a good question, Black Superwoman. But do they have the motorcycle? Yeah, from Purple Rain.
Well, here's the thing. So then you have to find, like, I have a T-800 Terminator from Terminator 2, a hot toy figure, but I had to go find Tamiya makes a 1/6 Fat Boy Low Harley Davidson that he used in that movie. So I went and bought it was a Japan only release, and so I have that kit. So I do have a motorcycle. I would have to find out what the motorcycle is. But this link to the problem is this Purple Rain figure is a custom figure, but it's really good. I wish I don't know if there's another one.
I sent a different link. Yeah.
The Cavitano Cavalry Trooper Che says, curious if R&B knows about special edition Seattle Sounders Hendrix Purple Kit.
I do not, but the Seattle Sounders is our local football team or soccer team. But I didn't know that they made that. Although that sounds something right up my alley.
Oh, hey, Shellback. I hate YouTube sitting here waiting for this thing to start, and it just did 8 minutes later. I don't know what YouTube's deal is, but glad you can finally see us. And Griffin Turbo says, hey, yo, everyone. Well, hello. 21 of you folks watching. Thank you so much. We are here with Robert Meyer Burnett, and we are talking Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 1.
Oh, it was a blast going back through that.
Man, where do we freaking start?
I know.
Emissary.
Captain Sisko's pissed off face talking to Picard right there.
Yeah, no, it's great.
My stuff's not as cool as R&B's, but this is like, I bought this, I think like 2 years, I'm going to say maybe around season 5. And it was the first convention purchase that I made of like Star Trek merch. So I've had it for like years.
I think the pilot for Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the best of. I think it's better than Encounter at Farpoint. I think it's better than Caretaker, better. And I think it's better than what was the pilot for Enterprise called? I'm drawing a blank on it right now. But
boring.
I loved Emissary. I think Emissary is a great Star Trek pilot. I think it does a tremendous job setting up the world, setting up the characters. And I think right when he first stepped on the screen, trying to rescue his dead wife, pulling her out of the Saratoga,
Jennifer.
Avery Brooks was amazing.
It wasn't even just it wasn't even just that though. The way they did that small crawl with the classic Star Trek, like the TNG text, and then they went right back to what everyone remembers: the Locutus Wolf 359, how that connected to Avery Brooks and what kind of damage it did to him and where he got to DS9.
Exactly. And even more so when they show like what's going on with the ship and just the dire circumstances of what's going on. And he's going to like get his son and get his daughter. And oh God, I screwed up. Get his son, Jake. And you hear the countdown where it's like, 3 minutes until the hull's breached and everything's going to blow up. And he's trying to get his son out. They get his son out. He's still trying to get his wife out. And I didn't notice like how tense it was. And then they say 2 minutes, before everything's going to blow up and you hear the breach going on. And he's just like, we can't just leave her here. And just the sound that he makes when I think it's a second officer decided to take him out of there. It is just heartbreaking. And I want to say like those opening minutes of the Emissary, it emotionally makes you invested extremely quickly.
Also, we never saw the Battle of Wolf 359 in Next Generation. We saw the aftermath. Yeah. I mean, they showed up and we saw the graveyard of ships, but seeing that whole battle, and it has one of the great effect shots ever done for Star Trek on TV is when his escape pod leaves the Saratoga. It's an incredible shot where they leave and then you see it going off into the distance. I mean, they spent they spared no expense. I mean, they did, but
it was wild.
Episode was great. I mean, everything about it was great.
It was even awesome when they're doing it just before that scene and they're showing the because they didn't have enough ships when they came to Earth, right? So they were using like older retrofitted like Constitution classes and everything, and they were just going at it. And most of that graveyard was those ships because they were not prepared. They couldn't penetrate the shields. The Borg would literally just tractor beam them, drain the shields, and start cutting them open like a pie and just take out the humans one by one. And you're sitting there going, I remember this. Damn.
It was just a great callback to what was done in TNG, and it just immediately plugged you into finding out what happened at 359 and what was the consequence of what happened there. And it was interesting having Picard as Locutus, basically his actions, although he wasn't in control of himself, how it wound up affecting others, and having Sisko with that reaction of, I have to talk to this guy. Remember, the Enterprise kept hailing him and he just like ignored it. And he finally's like, yeah, okay, I'll go. And you could just feel just the animosity coming off of Cisco. And Picard, just when he finally realizes,
Yeah,
why that's the case.
Patrick Stewart plays it pretty well when he finds out that Cisco is a veteran of the Battle of Wolf 359. There was a great recognition, like, oh man, and now Picard understand, but he still has to keep professional decorum, and you've got this new post, and I expect you to do your job and be a Starfleet officer, even though he understands of all the people that could give him a bad time. Avery Brooks is somebody who, Cisco is somebody who could get away with it because he has a reason to.
The way also Picard delivered is the way he delivers the other crew. They're having the very big doubts when you're looking at it from the TNG perspective, whether or not they think they should be part of the crew, and they're asking for resignation. And it falls in that same way he does it all the time. He gives them just enough time and pretends they forgot, even though he's never going to follow through with the resignation papers. And he did that. And the way Picard's face was, even Stewart's face, it was perfect because he looked going, that man wants to hit me. I can't throw rank because I don't know what it's like to lose a wife.
Right.
I don't know what it's like to lose. I don't know what I cost him. And he still is trauma at that point. He's still traumatized by the Borg, the Locutus, and what was done. This is still back in the early days to a point.
If I was Cisco, I'd catch him outside.
Well, what's really interesting to compare and contrast, you look at the 2-part episode of Discovery and how I think it really failed to do any of the same kind of things that Deep Space Nine does so well. And it was such a strange, they opened Discovery with Burnham and Filippo Georgiou walking in the desert, carving a Starfleet insignia in the sand that can apparently be seen from orbit. Well, because there's a storm rolling in, and
well, Robert, didn't you know when you carve a symbol into the desert, right? It also activates the sonar in space, right? So
and the wind is blowing. They have a storm coming in, so they're carving this giant, the Starfleet Delta that's supposed to not get blown away in the wind of the storm that's rolling in. By the way, that scene was not in the original version of that script, and it just, when you go and you look at the elegance of how they started Deep Space Nine, and I'm like, do you guys watch the old episodes of Star Trek? I mean, Deep Space Nine, that pilot is a masterclass in how do you introduce an entire new group of characters in the middle of action, and we meet everybody. Like when we get to the station, when Cisco gets to the station, it's a mess. Everybody's, everything is a mess because the Bajorans they were allowed, the provisional government it's not working, and the Cardassians wrecked everything, and when they left the station,
the place they left.
And you've got all these business people like Quark. We meet Quark, and he's like, I'm just, it's a mess. So the situation is immediately one, and then you see Cisco start fixing things, and whenever somebody needs, he's there to help. And when we meet all of our characters, the Starfleet characters come on later, but when we meet Kira Nerys, I mean, she's very disdainful and spunky, and I don't want to cross her, and you meet Quark and you meet Odo, and it's just like you're immediately interested in the entire milieu and what's going on.
And that's a good point that you bring up, because with every character that's introduced, it's introduced in such a way that your emotional investment is almost immediate. Like when we meet Kira, she's just pretty much like, I don't freaking like the Federation, but I have to deal with you. So you're just going to have to take me as I am and deal with it. And then you have Bashir, who shows up, who's all wide-eyed,
I'm on the frontier.
I'm on the frontier medicine. These are my people, Dr. Well, you are on the frontier.
And Kira just wants to kick him square in the ass for that. It's like you can just feel that because we've been introduced to her first. Odo trying to keep order. Quark, I'm just trying to make some money because that's what we Ferengis like to do. And it is. It's like you said, it's a masterpiece of introducing all of these characters, and we care about them.
Right.
I'm sorry about this. I thought this was relevant too, so I threw on the game. I'm using my capture card, but yeah, you can actually go to DS9. Get off my screen. But there.
Yeah, and what was really cool. I thought it was at the time. What people forget too, at the time, when the show was going to debut in '93, there was a lot of pushback. Fans are like, well, they're not going to go anywhere. They're just stuck on a, and I thought I thought it was like, if Star Trek was a Western, a wagon train to the stars. That's how Roddenberry sold the show originally. I love the idea that this is like a fort on the frontier, out in, and I guess they would say in Indian country or something, that's on the border of an untamed land. And I thought that was I liked that premise. I thought that was great. And then we see there the added, the wormhole. What an interesting, suddenly you get a really interesting science fiction premise. There's a stable wormhole to a section of the galaxy we've never been able to get to. We don't know why or what this wormhole is. Where does it come from? What is it for? And the idea that it ties into the Bajoran religion. The Celestial Temple is where their own prophets live, and we find out the prophets are wormhole aliens, which is exactly right out of the Star Trek playbook. And everything, how it's all set up is so interesting. And then, of course, the Cardassians, they're itching to take that station back. They're just itching to start a fight. So we meet Gul Dukat, Mark Alemo coming back. We first saw him in the 4th season of Next Generation playing a Cardassian. Now they bring him back. He was in The Wounded, the episode with Bob Gunton and Ben Maxwell and all that. So that was really, really cool. And Mark Alemo was incredible. I mean, as an actor.
He was just he was amazing.
Amazing.
The way and I always have to give props to people who, when they have to wear prosthetics and all that they can act through the prosthetic. So you see, like, the character comes to life. It isn't like a mask talking to you. It like becomes that actual person. So Renee Auberjonois, same thing.
And Armin Shimmerman.
Especially Armin Shimmerman.
I mean, that was what an audacious choice. I mean, the Ferengi were always kind of, they didn't come off well in Next Generation.
Cardassians. Yeah, that's what I was about to call it. He's like, no, I doubt, because if the Cardassians looked anything like the Kardashians, you can imagine just giant, beautiful butts and just looking in the mirror. And I'm just like, okay, come on, what? I wanted to go there.
But no, I thought that the Ferengi, everybody, they just weren't, no one liked them in Next Generation. I mean, they were sort of ill-conceived, always, even all the way back from the first season of TNG. So it was audacious of them to give us a family of Ferengi that were going to be main characters with Quark, Rom, and Nog. And again, more prosthetic makeup. So you've got the Ferengis, you've got Odo, you've got Cardassians, and it could have been the fact that those actors, like you said, their personalities, they really came through despite all the makeup they were wearing, was a real testament to the cast. Great actors on that show, and they just got better. All of the secondary characters that develop. I mean, we're talking first season, but later, I mean, we had Louise Fletcher show up, as Kai Wynn, and I mean, it was
O'Brien.
Bringing and
Keiko.
What a great link to TNG. So it's not just, they actually bring over Miles O'Brien, who is a guest star, a recurring character, and they put him at the forefront as well, which was, I thought, great. Really interesting all the way around.
They were able to bring not even like a starship crew to balance, because Cisco had to bring him and Jake. Jake didn't really want to go to. He wasn't used to it. And then you had Miles, who started getting set up. He got a promotion to become chief engineer of the station. And even then, there was restrictions and reservations when it came to Keiko and Molly, because it was an environment they were not ready to set up, especially when there was no schooling. The kids were allowed to run rampant, and eventually it got to the point that Keiko became the teacher of the station, and that brought a whole new slew of issues, because not only are you a station orbiting a planet with different types of values and religions, you also had to adapt to all the other types of races on that station and visiting, coming to live or not.
And another thing that I think that I guess it gets more credit for it now, but we talk about how diversity is so important in terms of representation. But what people forget, in the early 90s, America was still coming out of the crack epidemic of the 80s, and you had Black families had been decimated, and lots of single mothers and dealing with their kids. And here was a portrayal of a Black family, a Black father and a Black son, who had a loving, caring, functional relationship where there was mutual respect. They clearly loved one another, and they were truly great people. This was almost revolutionary. It was not Cliff Huxtable. You know, it wasn't the Cosbys. No. This was a very real, and there was never any mention of the fact that they were black.
No,
nobody,
none whatsoever.
They were black.
Not,
and that's representation done correctly. You just show people that are good people and do what they do, and have that. And not only was it was just a great depiction of a father-son relationship. Doesn't forget the race. I mean, I think it was one of the strongest. The relationship that Jake and Sisko had throughout that show, throughout the entirety of the 7 years of the show, was incredible. And to watch Sirach Lofton grow up as that character was really something special. And I think that, I mean, it led to one of the great episodes of Star Trek ever, The Visitor. But it was amazing, and I don't think it ever got its due. Certainly not at the time. I mean, it does now.
It didn't. I remember when the show started. Actually, when I got time to like sit down and talk with Avery Brooks about it, to him it was very important, that relationship between Sisko and his son Jake, because again, like you were saying, it showed a loving relationship, you know, between a black father and his son. And I almost want to say it's like a combination of the father-son dynamic from the show Good Times and a little bit of like the Huxtables kind of thrown in there. So it was kind of like a mix of the two. And that wasn't something that you saw, you know, on the screen. And I remember when the casting was made for, we're going to use, you know, Avery Brooks, you know, as a captain. And I think Rick Berman in an interview had said, you know, hey, why don't we just go ahead and, you know, have a captain who just happens to be black. But the person that they picked was someone who was such a distinguished actor that's what took over most of the part. Like, oh, that's so-and-so. Okay, cool. It's like, you know, casting James Earl Jones. Yeah, we know he's black, but we just care that he's James Earl Jones, you know.
Right. He was Hawk. He'd been Hawk before. And you know, he was, what I really loved about him, and I think a lot of people at first, he was much more, his delivery was very sort of theatrical. And I liked that. I think a lot of people, it was he didn't like come into his own for people until season 4 when he had the goatee, you know.
Yeah, he kind of, because I was looking at the season 1 episodes and I'm kind of like he's still kind of staged, because it's stage is different from episodic television, because when you're on stage, it's like you have that live feedback of, you know, from your audience, and you can kind of be in this big space. But it's like with television, it's like this little, you know, box, and the way that you act in the theater isn't the same as you do on screen. So it's interesting seeing, you know, if you've seen like all the episodes of Deep Space Nine and you go back to season 1, it's like, yeah, he was kind of still in theater mode at that time.
But he was still good. I mean, I still really, because he's asked to do so much in the pilot. I mean, Emissary, and people should know that Emissary was parts 1 and 2 were broadcast as a single movie. Yeah, it was only like with Next Generation, Farpoint was split into 2 later, and so is All Good Things. But when they first aired, they were 90-minute movies.
They were
2 hours
so
with
good.
commercials.
They were. Canadian Spider-Man, why the hell would you mention it? I don't know, but you had some people, again, you got some segments of people who want to make that the central theme. And I know a lot of people talked about that at conventions, you know, when are you going to talk about race or whatever? And Avery was like, we got stories to tell. That's not the most important thing right now.
No, I mean the fact that and to me nowadays everyone wants to tell everybody, look at us, look at how how we're showing representation and all that stuff. I always think to myself, I'm like, did you look at the cast of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, especially all the people they brought in over the course of the 7 seasons? They did one episode, Far Beyond the Stars, that directly referred to race. But it was an interesting, they never talked about that, you know, and that's what was so great is you don't, you know, for an allegorical show, one of the things about Star Trek is you show the way you want your future to be. You don't tell everybody.
Exactly.
And I one of the things about Discovery, when you have people like Adira have to tell, you have a non-binary character telling a gay character what pronouns they want to be called by 1,000 years in the future. And I throw up my hands and I'm like, you people who are writing Star Trek today don't get it. You know, you've got to go back and watch your Star Trek and see how it's done. Watch Deep Space Nine.
Robert,
see how it's done.
I have a serious question. It's kind of related to pronouns. By any chance, do you also identify as a tree? I was wondering.
I do not.
Oh, okay, good. I got that covered.
I don't identify as a matter of fact, my favorite pronouns are I, me, and mine. That's my favorite joke to tell. But people, those are pronouns. But I find it so strange that we live in a society that wants to make a big deal about, like, let's subvert language as if that's going to help you. I don't understand where that's supposed to take you. I always believe in, tell me how you want to be referred to, and I'll refer to you that way. I have no problem with that. I mean, the point is that these characters demanded respect because of the people that they were. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way they were always written. And I think that's one of the great things about Deep Space Nine. And it was interesting. You watch the evolution of this show during the first season. Mm-hmm. And by the end, the last 2 episodes are especially the penultimate episode, Duet. One of the great episodes of Star Trek.
Oh, that's one that is way up there, because that was, I think, the first episode that had me just fooled until the end. It just seemed like things just kept changing. We're trying to figure out, who is this guy and why is he just so, I'm like, he's completely irredeemable. What the heck is going on? And then when you find out exactly who he is and why he did what he did, just the change in Kira from, and their hatred, and rightfully so that she did, what happened to the Bajorans in that labor camp, and her animosity just goes poof, and you just see a change in her. Like, no, why are you doing this? You should not have to do this.
I still think
seeing just how how he's just like, no, we all have to pay for this. Cardassian needs to be held accountable.
Yep.
My favorite character, Cardassian, still to this date, it will always be Garrick. I think if you look at it properly, Garrick has had not only the best kind of story arc, whether it's himself outside as a character, realizing who he has to be and what choices he has to make, but the internal struggles of those choices. And you see him in the beginning acting like a spy versus spy, where's Waldo kind of character, and he's always there like greeting Bashir, and then you get to the end and you see how much he's affected by his claustrophobia, feeling like he is killing thousands of his species because he's helping the Federation. And it's like the hero anti-hero conflicting within itself. It's amazing.
So Robert, what did you think of was it Andrew Robinson? Yeah, what did you think of Garrick when he was first introduced?
I've always loved Andrew Robinson, but I loved him. I mean, I loved that character. I mean, clearly he's that classic. He's a lot more than he appears to be. And what I loved is that between Rene Auberjonois and people like Andrew Robinson, they just looked like they were having so much fun playing those roles. And it was, they're very, I guess, call it Star Trekian in their delivery. And it was a joy to watch them. I mean, I love how Odo's all gruff and he's always looking down his nose at people. Right, Quark, whatever you say. I mean, it was so great because there was this mix and match. I mean, one of the criticisms that I think was always leveled at Deep Space Nine that I couldn't stand, because people are like, well, if you don't like Star Trek Discovery, how come you like Deep Space Nine so much? Because it flew in the face of Roddenberry's utopian philosophy of the future. And I'm like, actually, I think Deep Space Nine shows it's almost the most Roddenberry-esque of the shows, even though he passed away before it debuted, because the galaxy is not full. We, as human beings, come from a utopian civilization in the Star Trek universe, but the rest of the universe isn't utopian. And now we're right on the edge. So we have to bring our evolved humanity 300 years hence, 400 years hence, to the galaxy and show the rest of the untamed universe what we're all about. And that's what I think Deep Space Nine always was. And the struggle was, how do we hold on to our values and at the same time respect everything else that's going on in the universe and respect all these crazy aliens and from all different backgrounds. And I loved that. And I thought that the show did a really, really good job. That people are like, well, it got so dark in the end. And I'm like, well, Earth didn't start the Dominion War, you know, and the point was, how do we from a utopian civilization deal with it when the outside universe encroaches on our civilization? How do we maintain our values? And how do we maintain the idea that that life is sacred and all that in the face of galactic conflict? And I think that was something Deep Space Nine did really, really well. And it wasn't always easy, but in the end, I mean, it never failed to show humanity at its best, thoughtful, always looking out for one another. And the fact that you had so many different kinds of people, different alien races that were all trying to get along. I mean, it was such a microcosm of, it was a reflection of our world. Well, even today, one of the things I love about Deep Space Nine is it doesn't feel dated. Like, I already think if you go back and watch Discovery, it feels very dated. Like they're trying to make it up today. We have to infuse this show with everything that we're concerned about right now, you know, like the idea of pronouns. Deep Space Nine has none of that. It feels timeless because great storytelling, even in a science fiction context, is all about characters and story. And those were telling timeless Star Trek stories. Although, you know, admittedly, it was a little rocky. Deep Space Nine's first season is better than, I think, Next Generation's first season, but it's still rocky. It's a little blander maybe than Next Generation's first season.
I just missed the goatee. I can't stand
but you missed the goatee.
I can't stand Avery Brooks. After you see him with the goatee and the shaved head, when you see him with hair and no goatee, it's like, who put the baby face in this show? What is going on right now? I don't like it.
Now you done pissed me off now.
No, I'm not trying to piss you off, but you know what I mean. He would look,
I like him, bro.
The goatee. I like the goatee better. He doesn't, but you're drinking out of his head.
I know. It's weird, but I had to buy it at a convention. But and that's interesting that you bring that point up, Rob, about Deep Space Nine not feeling dated. When I was watching Duet, you know, at the end where Kira's escorting, and oh God, I'm so freaking bad with names, but they're trying to get him off the station. You know, and she's just like, why didn't you let me do this? You know, Cardassia could have been redeemed. She's like, no, Cardassia is going to need people like you. And the Bajoran, who did not want to be in the same cell with them, comes up and stabs him in the back, you know, pretty much kills him. They're like, and Kira's just like, you know, why did you do that? And he's just like, he's a Cardassian. And just the hate coming off of him. And I'm just like, wow, that's doing it without hitting you over the head with it. Because if Kira had the attitude of, okay, I hate Kardashians, I don't like dealing with Kardashians, and she has that change of heart, and to look at at another Bajoran and just gonna say, how could you do that?
Well, you have to remember when they first arrived, right? The Cardassians stripped, or Terrak Nord, they stripped that station bare. No weapons, no defenses. They took most of the shield generators. They took everything and wiped out what they could, to the point where not even the Ferengi or the Promenade Commission wanted to stay around it. Everyone's packing up and leaving.
Right.
So they had to come back and build from scratch. And that's actually how the way the show works, because they're starting from building bricks, a foundation, and by the time it gets to the end of the season or the end of the series, they show how much they've created something that's been destroyed to a home for everyone to go to.
Fight. Yeah, it's true. I did like the goatee.
Who had the better goatee, Worf or Cisco?
I'm gonna say Cisco.
Okay.
I'll go say that.
I was gonna say Dax, but okay.
But Steven, you bring up a good point. It's like when you get there, it literally looks like the ass end of space. It's like the station looks like crap. You know, it looks like a death trap, and people are trying to, rebuild, or if they wanted to anyway. So having them actually build from scratch. Yeah. And that first season just pretty much shows all the struggle that has to go on just to kind of build up, the station and to get people to come there. And, the things like having a school that's there, which I guess I won't talk about the season finale, but we'll talk about some of the other episodes. So I know, Robert, I know you like the first season. Outside of the premiere, what was the first episode of the first season where you were just like, I can't believe they did this?
Well, I liked like Past Prologue and Dax. Those were where you basically were getting backstories for Odo and Dax. And I thought that was I thought those were all really interesting character building episodes, giving us who are these people and what are they all about, but I think I wanted to get back. I just want to mention the idea of the wormhole aliens, and the way that suddenly these aliens existed outside of time. And I love the fact that those aliens weren't even aware really that they were worshipped by the Bajorans. But I liked all of that, and it was very interesting living non-linearly and outside of time. And they added that to me was heady science fiction combined with good Star Trek, and that's what I like. I don't like, again, not to bash on the show, but anytime I can, I will. When we discover what the source of the burn was in season 3 of Discovery, I'm just like, what is this fantasy gobbledygook that it has nothing to do. You're not giving us any interesting science fiction concepts here. It's a mishmash of 10 different things, and none of it makes any sense in whatever universe you want to tell stories in. Whereas the wormhole aliens were, what a really interesting, and they dominated. I mean, they were while they weren't always at the forefront of stories, they were constantly, their presence was constantly there throughout the Deep Space Nine's run. And it was, to me, I thought it was a really interesting sci-fi concept. And the idea that Sisko was the emissary, he was this prophet of the Bajoran people that had nothing to do with Bajor, that he could come from outside and and have a link with these wormhole aliens, and how the Bajorans then looked up to him. And there were other Bajorans that resented the fact that the emissary wasn't Bajoran. I loved all of that.
I love that, where they're just like, you're not one of us. And and they pick, and they pick you. And even just to go back to emissary, when he's communicating with them and trying to explain the concept of like linear time and consequences, and they tell him, you keep coming back to this memory. You keep coming back to this. And it's just like, wow, he's trying to teach them. And the biggest lesson he didn't learn himself. They had to teach him that.
Yeah. I have a question with this, though. I want to ask both of you. Okay, we're talking about the wormhole aliens, or the prophets, if you want to put them that way, depending if you're coming from Bajor or not. But DS9 is a corporeal station. Does that mean that the Temple of Prophets, aka the wormhole, is technically a non-corporeal station for life forms? For them in general, because it's stationary, they created it, and in a way it's their own DS9 if you want to look at it. And that's interesting. It's not a corporeal state.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that the wormhole was just like, for whatever reason, it was a gateway to whatever realm they lived in, as opposed to being they're situated there. I figured they could, but that's an interesting point.
Because it's not only a doorway to get to the Gamma Quadrant if they allow it. They don't have to allow transport. That's the thing, though. They do control it. They built it. They can shut it down anytime they want. But at the same time, they can misdirect it and take you to wherever. What the hell? That scared the shice out of me. Oh, my God. Red alert. Bad idea. Yeah, I get it.
That's okay. I got stuff in the oven. That's my first alarm.
But that's pretty. But the way you also look at it, it's also their home, their realm, and it's their own space station away. So technically, if you want to look at it from that point of view, there are 2 space stations there the whole time: the wormhole for non-corporeal, and there's corporeal, which is the DS9 Star Trek series, and both also live within unison.
No, it's true. That's a very interesting point. I didn't really ever think about that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a dork.
No, I like that.
That's okay.
I like that idea.
We all are about, about this stuff. I just kind of thought that the wormhole was like, oh, great. It's, like this super highway that no one knew was there. And I just thought that was kind of cool. But I hadn't thought about it in those terms, though.
You want to know a secret? I just thought about that now. It popped in my head. But
that's
I just
what
thought
happened.
about it. It makes sense.
The best idea. But I just thought that going back and watching that, when they saw like the wormhole and Kira's like, we got to claim that for Bajor. I'm like, yeah, you do. Get this station freaking moving, there. And I just thought that was cool because it was just like the Bajorans just seemed to just pretty much be left with basically nothing. And then you have this wormhole, and then there's commerce that can happen and all of that. But with that also brings a whole lot of other host of problems too.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Deep Space Nine really, the whole show in a way, every season had sort of a different premise. And the first season is, okay, there's this station, it's on the frontier. It's a fort on the frontier. And yet they still were telling Star Trek stories. So they couldn't, every episode was sort of different in a way. And they were telling these Star Trek stories, but they didn't all hold together because they weren't doing serialized storytelling yet, at least not in the Star Trek format. They're still in a teaser and 5-act structure. So it's like, okay, let's bring on Q, which they did.
And Vosh. And don't forget Vosh, because Vosh was a good president because they linked up a TNG episode again.
Yeah.
Which was their format to DS9.
But I have to say, my favorite tie-in with TNG was Luoxana Troy.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, they kept doing that kind of stuff, and it was, I think it hampered the first season because they still didn't quite know what they were doing with the show. And then in the second season, it became a lot about Bajoran politics, and they were always angry. Everybody on Bajor was kind of mad all the time. And yeah. And then in the third season, they went all the second season of Buck Rogers, the 25th Century. It's like, here's a ship. We'll give you a ship, we'll give you the Defiant, so now you can go places. And still they're trying to find their way. And I would say like there was a quarter of the episodes of Deep Space Nine's first season are good to great. And then 3/4 are just kind of middling episodes.
Yeah.
Maybe about I got better in the second season. Like half the episodes are good to great. And then in the third season, maybe still half. And then by the time you get to the fourth season, even though the ratings were, the show never clicked the way Next Generation did. They bring on Worf and the 2-parter Way of the Warrior. But then all of that was leading into the Dominion War. And of course, okay, the show only could work with war. But I think that what was so great about it was as they expanded the cast of characters and did all of that world building and all the people they hired, Mark Alamo becoming a good guy, then a bad guy, doing his villain turns, then getting possessed by the paw wraiths, and then you had Louise Fletcher, Nurse Ratched herself. She was playing a bigger role, and they brought in Penny and people like Damar. Casey Biggs is Damar, and the relationship between Jake and Nog. I mean, everything that happened, and then it was just it got epic. But the first season, it's not as rough as Next Generation's first season. You don't have episodes like Justice or Home Soil or Code of Honor. You will have no treaty, no vaccine, and no Lieutenant Yar. You don't have, even though that episode was about a matriarchal society, but still.
But they did bring in the Duras sisters again, didn't they?
They did.
They're hot. I don't care. Like those are the hottest Klingons I've ever seen in my life. And those Duras sisters always seem to pop up, and they always seem to have the right set of corset, just enough to make it like PG-13. But little boys that are 13 going, I need to read these comics and slow down this show.
No, it was but again, bringing all those people in, it seemed like they were trying to they were going out of their way to connect it in weird, strange ways to TNG, which I didn't think they had to do because they had such an interesting milieu to play in. And I don't think they really knew what to do with it yet. It was, you know.
I would have to agree with you on that. As someone who didn't get into Deep Space Nine, I want to say until about season 3, everything that I had heard, it seemed like somebody was, a guest star from TNG showing up on Deep Space Nine. So it's kind of like Deep Space Nine seemed to be like the Love Boat in a way. It's like you keep getting who's guest star from TNG. Is it going to be this week? And I think the first season 1 episode that I watched, and I probably shouldn't have, I think it was Move Along Home.
Oh man.
I think that was when I watched it when the show first came on. I'm like, okay, I'm out. But I think, like you were saying, they weren't quite sure what to do because it was this new concept of a show. And you had people like me who were diehard TNG, just like, why the heck should we stop watching Next Gen in order to watch Deep Space Nine? And I think Next Gen was still filming for another 2 years when Deep Space Nine started, right?
They kept incorporating things from DS9 to Star Trek. They're trying to do the push and pull to make it somewhat balanced, because you would get episodes where I think it was Data, Picard, Troy, and Geordi. They were on the way back, I think, from DS9, and they were in the runabout, because DS9 introduced the runabouts, right? And those things were pretty cool because it was like the larger size minivan shuttlecraft. Yeah,
but and the Maquis, the whole idea of the Maquis. Mm-hmm. And things like that, the disputed territories. I mean, they did some really. The funny thing about it was, because Star Trek was not an episodic show yet, and episodic television hadn't been embraced, that they weren't able to make the shows were still sort of separate. Yeah, and they could have been much more. I think nowadays there would be a lot closer continuity. But back then, it wasn't something that was normally done in TV. So they did a little of it, and it was kind of interesting. Like, I love when you'd see a runabout show up in TNG, or, they would talk about the fact that Michelle Forbes just didn't want to do. Yeah, she just didn't want to do. She was supposed to be Kira, and kind of like Valeris in Star Trek VI, who was supposed to be Saavik, but they couldn't get Kirstie Alley to come back. So. And in a way, I like the fact that Nana Visitor, I think, was great, and she really developed over the show well. I mean, I really like what they did to her character. I mean, she was a little one note when she started, but she definitely.
Do you think Kira was the one who went through the most different hairstyles out of all of the cast?
Oh man!
Because even by the second episode, you notice the first episode she kind of like that bob cut, and by the second or third episode, it changed again back to something else. And I'm like, you have the Janeway hairstylist hiding in your closet or something, because it's like bam, 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 bam. They're like, Nina.
Yeah, I think you're right, but again, they just didn't know. They're looking at they had a hard time. When I interviewed the actress who played Shelby for the Blu-rays, for the Best of Both Worlds Blu-rays, she was saying that they had no idea what to do with her hair, and she hated the way her hair looked. If you go back and you look at Shelby's hair in Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2, it's not flattering. It's not a good hair, and they just sometimes didn't know. You'd think they would, but they wanted to have hair that differentiated people, so you could look at them and go, okay, so-and-so is different than so-and-so. But a lot of the time, especially for the female characters, it led to bad haircuts.
Yes, it did.
Or bad hairstyles.
I didn't understand that either. It's just kind of like, I don't get it. It's just like, I know you got hairstylists that know what they're doing, but it just seemed to be the most boring hairstyles, which is kind of like why I like Loxana Troy, because she always had a new wig on. So it's like her hair looked very very distinctive. But I don't know what the deal is with that. I never asked Nana Visitor about it when I met her. I think she said something about it at a convention once about her hair.
It's funny because she's in her 60s now, and she's hot as shit. She is.
She's so goddamn. She is.
I mean, it's so funny. I look at women like Barbara Crampton, who is in Reanimator. She's got a great social media presence. She's like 62 and is just as beautiful as she was when she was 30. And Nana Visitor, with her white hair, and when she was in the Deep Space Nine documentary, I mean, I think it's very refreshing to see these actresses. We don't traditionally think of, actresses are getting older, but nowadays it's like, no, you can be in your 60s and still be as hot as you were in your 30s. It's amazing. Amazing. Yes. And Nana Visitor, I loved her character. I loved how strong she was. How she wasn't necessarily, they didn't glam her up because you had Terry Farrell, who could be glamorous and had the long hair. She was a model anyway. But Nana Visitor, there was something about her that was always sexy and feminine, even though she would kick your ass 4 ways till Sunday.
That's what was sexy about her. You just
That's
nailed
exactly
it. The fact
right.
that she was strong, she would kick your ass, but at the same time, when she was attractive and started having relationships with different people within the series, she showed her weak side, because as much as the strength that she tried to put on as a Bajoran, because she was a rebel fighter, she was also very what's the word? Breakable.
Yeah, and she had relationships with with the religious leader that she got involved with, and who became a recurring character. And it was interesting that Deep Space Nine also didn't shy away from relationships, and later on you had Worf and Dax. I mean, talk about an interracial. You have a Trill who has been multiple genders throughout, gender, both male and female throughout their lives, marrying a Klingon. I mean, that was pretty progressive, but they didn't come out and have to point that out to you. They're just like, here's what we're doing, and if you really thought about the fact that Worf, as a Klingon who has all kinds of traditional values, or his Klingon values, he had no problem marrying Dax, who was a strong female whose symbiote had been both men and women throughout its life. They never addressed that. But again, when you look at it, you're like, that's pretty damn progressive.
It was, because speaking of Dax, because with that character, that's kind of where we didn't think so at the time, or maybe we did, the whole transgender conversation happened. Just when the conversation between Cisco and Jadzia, and she was talking to her, and it's like, wait, what do you mean, old man? What are you talking about? And that's what we learn. And then in the episode Dax, that was a heavy episode.
Heavy, man. I just watched that recently and I'd forgotten. I'm like, my God, that was the 7th episode, and that was heavy.
Yeah, because they tried to try a 20-year-old woman or so, 25, for the crimes of a man that no longer exists. It was like the Worf story in a way. You know what I mean? With the selling out to the Romulans. If you're going back to God, what is it? What was the station? The battle of
Narendra 3.
Kittimer 6. Yeah, Kittimer.
Yeah, Kittimer.
And it was the same kind of thing. But she had 6 lifetimes before she met Worf. So technically, Worf not only had married Dax, he married Curzon and everyone that came before.
And it was another thing, and we saw in other episodes like Rejoined when Dax's former spouse comes, and and the thing, what was really interesting is, like with the original Star Trek, when you had someone like Sulu or Uhura on the bridge, the representation was just there, but Deep Space Nine leaned heavily into those issues, but they just didn't say it. They just showed it. And no one ever stopped and went, wait a minute, Worf, do you have a problem with the fact that you're basically marrying a trans Trills are trans people. They're trans. And they delved into that, but they never made a big deal of it. They did it within its science fiction context, and I thought that was really interesting. And they didn't shy away from it either. That like with the Dax, they went into the science fiction ideas of what it means to be a Trill. Like, are you responsible for what happened? And they did all of these really, and that's what great science fiction does. And that's where I think modern Star Trek is falling down, because I don't think the writing is so didactic. It's so on the nose. They're hitting you over the head with, look at how we're so aware of today's problems. And we're going to, but they only present them to us as if they're of today. They're not extrapolating these things, what it would be like 1,000 years in the future. And Deep Space Nine did that. When humanity is amongst the stars, and you have people like Amanda Grayson fall in love with Sarek, the ambassador of Vulcan, and they have Spock. I mean, that's an interspecies relationship. And when you have Worf hooking up with Dax and getting married, the Dax symbiote is a trans creature that is just in the body of a female now. and Worf is falling in love with her. She's a real woman. She's a real woman. No one ever says, well, I mean, she used to be a man. No one ever.
This is where the differential comes in, because you don't seem to understand that. When we say Ezri Dax or Jadzia Dax, this is where it comes down to even prove that it's a transgender at the same time as not. Because Dax is the actual symbiont, while the first name is actually carried of the host. So you're technically, and we don't know the actual the gender of the symbiont in general, because it doesn't matter, because their whole lifestyle of how they're raised with everything, it is two people. It doesn't matter. It could be a male living with a woman or a male living with a male. The transgender has been nailed on such a pretense that you don't ever think about it, because it's not the forefront of the story. That doesn't make the story. It is part of a character trait. Then somehow it's gotten swapped over time with I guess Kurtzman schmack, whatever you want to call it. They've taken the trait and made it the importance. And if you're only focusing on the importance, you are diminishing the growth of a character. And when that happens, you no longer have quality of story.
No, I completely, that's very well put. I totally agree. And again, something Deep Space Nine, like the relationship Jake had with his father, Deep Space Nine was not thinking, they're not like, the writers weren't being like, look at me, look at what we're writing here. Look at how, call it woke if you want. I think that's such a
it's signaling to me, because Deep Space Nine, and we'll say like with that particular Trek, they were writing to make great stories that people could relate to. The story was the forefront. It's like, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you write a good story and I'm hooked, I'm there. That's what Deep Space Nine did when they took on a lot of these issues that TNG didn't want to touch. For whatever reason, it was kind of like, we kind of want to keep that sanitized and over there. We don't want to deal with these social issues. DS9 did, and they wrote it in such a way that you weren't really looking at Cisco as Black. I will tell people this: there's no such thing as a colorblind society. We're not blind. We can see who it is. But it's when you go judging people based on what they look like, if you just only see that it's a Black captain, you don't see a Star Trek captain who happens to be Black. That's different, because the writing is everything that's inside the package, and then will make you invest in that character no matter what the heck they look like. And Deep Space Nine was awesome at that, just with the different characters from the different species, like Kai Wynn. I hated that chick.
I hated that bitch.
Because she was a bee. She was a big bee. You wanted to slap her.
But you were supposed to. But you know what? Yeah. Then they would always do something where you're like, oh, like she would say something or do something where you didn't hate her. Yes, something that would actually seem like, well, it was even at the beginning when you know she's always patronizing to Kira, with my child,
school, and when she would say, and I think she told Keiko, I understand that you may hate me, and I forgive you for that. I'm like, dang it, that's good writing. I want to hate this chick.
I know, and it was. I mean, obviously she was played as a villain, but a multifaceted. I've always said to people, the best Star Trek does not have villains. The best Star Trek has antagonists, and those are different things.
How so?
Well, I think that an antagonist is a villain is somebody who is bad. And people always say that and they're portrayed as being bad. They do things that are amoral or things that are anti-life, like they're murderers or they lie, they cheat, they steal. But you could always look at Kai Wynn, because she would give you her perspective, and from a certain standpoint, you're like, okay, I don't agree with her, but she's not going to murder somebody. Like she wasn't evil. She was an opportunist and she was scheming, but ultimately they presented her as she really did believe that what she was doing was for the greater good of Bajor. Yes, she had hubris, and yes, she had an ego, and yes, she wanted to be the one to save and deliver Bajor. But I don't think she was bad, and I think that was one of the interesting things about her, especially because we meet in the beginning, we meet Kai Opaka, who was we meet Kai Opaka at the beginning of Deep Space Nine before we meet Louise Fletcher's character. And so we saw what a truly good religious leader as far as Deep Space Nine was concerned.
Mhm.
Kyle Parker was to me the best of the, she was the most pious, I guess, and the most godly of, or the most prophety of the religious leaders that we meet. And then we meet Kira's boyfriend, who what's his name?
I'm drawing a blank. I know who you're talking about, but I'm drawing a blank.
It's right on the tip of my tongue, and I'm like, why am I?
I don't want to go to Google. I'm so lazy. I'm gonna go.
The list of Kira's boyfriends. I'll do.
And
that.
that was what happened to him was brutal.
Oh, that
brutal.
My heart broke for her.
I know, and that was. I just
Really
recently watched that. God, why am I drawing a blank on his name? But I think that was what was interesting about overall that Deep Space Nine was.
Bareil? Is that
Bareil? That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Vedic Bareil.
Mm-hmm.
Vedic Bareil. That actor was great. And by the way, the people in Deep Space Nine, they had adult sexual relationships with one another, which was something that Deep Space Nine did not shy away from. I mean, you never saw what went on in the holodecks, in Quark's holodecks, the way people were really using them, but you knew what was going on.
You knew what was up. And even going back to the episode Dax. And it was funny when they were trying to figure out where he was, and was he the one that sent the transmission? And they found, the widow. I'm like, oh shoot, are they going to go there? Are they going to go there? And then she shows up and she's like, yeah, Curzon couldn't have sent that message at that time because he was in my bed. I'm like, and you see Jadzia's face. I'm like, yeah. Curzon was getting his freak on, wasn't he?
It needed Jerry. It needed like the Jerry shouting from Jerry Springer at that point. He was in my bed. Then all I hear is Jerry. You
know what? Yeah, but it's like the way that they actually they went there. They didn't shy away from the from the reality.
No, I mean,
Curzon, he drank a little too much. He wasn't your classic. I guess Trill that you would want, but that's that was who he was.
I always felt that one of the, as much as I like Next Generation, one of the deficiencies of the show was I felt that it always treated adult romantic relationships in almost a giggly way, like your kids on the playground going so and so's going on, whereas Deep Space Nine didn't. People get together, they get romantically involved, they get their freak on, whatever. Deep Space Nine took that as that's just a given. That's what people do.
Yeah.
Whereas Next Generation, it was always like, I'm in high school and so-and-so's dating so-and-so and being all giggly about it. And yet Deep Space Nine, people had mature, like they didn't need to show, like now Star Trek, I guess you have to show people in bed together.
Yeah.
Which it's just weird, but I'm by no means a prude at all. I mean, bring on, as John Campy would say, the filthy, whatever. But in Star Trek though, ultimately the Deep Space Nine it's still a family show. Ultimately it's a 4-quadrant show that should appeal to everyone. And they don't have to swear. They don't have to show people in bed together.
They're not picking up body parts with a shovel or off their shoe. They're not exploding them into Jello. They're not going spank my ass and call me a pronoun. They're not doing any of this stuff. Sorry, I had to throw that in.
And now what modern Star Trek is doing? Well, we have to make shows that appeal to children. Star Trek did appeal to children. I started watching it when I was 5. I liked it because I hoped to grow up and be like the people in Star Trek. I don't need to see, we're going to get a show with a bunch of snarky young kids in Star Trek Prodigy that are probably smarter than the adults, which is the worst, most pandering form. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, so I don't want to, but even Star Trek Lower Decks, I'm like, you can't write a Star Trek show. So now a lot of people like it because of course it's got the humor. I get it, I understand, but so your humor now, the characters are not, you have to make them all like, this character flies in the face of regulations and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, I get it, but to me that's not the kind of Star Trek. That's not my flavor or brand of Star Trek. That's Star Trek should ultimately, at the end of the day, it has to be, first of all, it's elitist in that it demands that you're the best person you can be. Like Star Trek, if you're not, then an episode will be about you. An episode will be about your
like
deficiencies.
your holodeck addiction.
Right. Yes.
Oh, broccoli. I love broccoli. He was great.
I mean, and that's the thing. I think that, to me, I loved Star Trek even as a kid because these people were the smartest and the best. You had to be on the edge of the final frontier or you would die. And so you're watching the very best that humanity. So ultimately, this is what humanity will eventually be. This is the kind of human I want to be. I want to be like those characters on the show.
Right.
And that was the thing. Even though Deep Space Nine had different personalities, you could see they made Julian Bashir. He was really grating when you first met him. Like, I wouldn't have liked that guy,
He was an annoying pain in the ass.
He was a horn dog. Think about it.
He was a try-hard. That's pretty much what he was.
He didn't care about Dax. He was hitting on Dax every episode. He looked like a lost puppy going, Dax, just once. Come have dinner with me. Come to the far deck with me. And then he developed eventually a bromance with Miles, and it was just even weirder.
It was weird. Oh, I wanted to read this from Kai because this is, again, an example of what I'm talking about characters. When you do the writing right, it appeals to everyone. Kai says, my dad took off. Cisco was one of the characters I looked up to when figuring out who I am and how to be.
That's Star Trek in a nutshell. That comment is something I don't think the writers of Star Trek think they're writing those characters now, but they're not.
No.
It does not hold your interest. That's the thing with DS9. I've done this test numerous times. I will put on Picard on one device screen, and I'll put DS9 in the other, and I will sit there, and and my head will turn to DS9. It can be in the background. You can just listen to it in the background. It is one of those shows that you develop a memorization to the point where you always can respect it because it's always something enjoyable. The other one's a one-shot pony.
Yeah, Cavatinho Che is saying we did not need Saw-level gore in Star Trek that Picard brought. No, we didn't. And that was, again, a list of grievances that I had. But we never saw, slasher film type gore in Trek. I mean, it was inferred. You saw people get, shot by phasers. You'd see ships blow up and they got hit by a Troton torpedo, but you weren't seeing body parts. They weren't trying to shock you with gore. And I think with Kurtzman Trek, it seems like they want to go for the shock value. Forget, if they'll write a crappy story, but try to get you in with, shock of the language, the signaling, we're doing this and all of that. And they're relying on that instead of good storytelling. And that's just freaking lazy as hell and an insult to the fans, but that's just me.
Also, does no one have a stun setting on their weapons anymore?
I know. I think Steven was saying something about that. And I was just like, I thought it was always stun. You never set to kill unless your life was seriously threatened. Exactly. No one sets it to kill because with the last episode of season 1 with In the Hands of the Prophets, where that one ensign, that it turns out that he was shot with a phaser, but the phaser was set to kill. And that was stunning because we're just like, you don't do that.
Right. And that's something, and I don't know where people blow up. You look at it's just they kill people willy-nilly in modern Star Trek. I don't get it. I mean, I guess they thought again that the Game of Thrones level of violence is something people want, but not in Star Trek.
No.
I mean, there's a fundamental lack of understanding of where modern Trek is now. Look, Star Trek has been in the midst of a hostage crisis since 2009. Actually, since 2007 or 6 when Bad Robot took over the franchise, and it's still there. And I don't see it changing anytime soon.
It's not going to. The problem is we're stuck with what it is, and we're going to have to just either not watch it. And it's already been proven. Like if you're watching Midnight's Edge yesterday, Paramount Plus is doing horribly. It's not mentioned. They've lost 55% and $55 with their stock prices just in general. Because
nobody's watching that.
The Trek is dead. They're not only not producing stories, they're killing off old characters. They are pulling a Disney. And the thing is, they're even throwing in the original creator's name and stepping on him, thinking they have a right to do that because we don't. That's not good taste. That's pathetic.
No, it's
Yeah,
not. New Picard's not Meyer Picard. Yeah.
but the thing is, they don't. What's interesting though, and I think it's unfortunately it's a part of the modern. There's a lot of people that just don't get that.
Yep.
You'd think that the smart people would understand that, but they don't. And I find it strange that you've got a lot of people that if you don't have a history with Star Trek and you come into Star Trek, what you want to do is make it your own. Like any creative person wants to make something their own. But when I see things on modern Star Trek, like I keep harping on this, but the turbo elevators, when you see the turbo lifts in Discovery are on these like rails in all of this open, empty space. They look like roller coasters. And I'm like, do you understand how this would work inside of a ship? There is no vast empty spaces in Star Trek unless it's a cargo bay or a shuttle bay. Have you not been in an elevator in a building? When an elevator's in a building, there's no empty space around an elevator.
No.
Well, I think it's Space Mountain inside of a Star Trek.
That's what they believe. And when you look at something like that, it betrays the fact that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the universe that you're working in. And that's just one indicator of it. But to me, that it always stands as a metaphor for how they know so little about, which is so strange because I have bookshelves full of reference material about Star Trek, and it's not like this is rocket science. And yet it is, apparently.
It is for these people, because I remember back in the day with DS9 and with TNG that there was the Star Trek, quote unquote, the Bible that they had of the canon and what you had to adhere to with that. And it was a point of pride because I think Deep Space Nine or Voyager? I think it started with Deep Space Nine where they were accepting scripts like outside, like if you were a fan and you wrote one.
Oh no, that was Next Generation. That goes all the way back.
Okay, because I knew friends who wanted to write scripts and they were like, yeah, you have to adhere to the, quote unquote Star Trek Bible. And it was a point of pride to write an outstanding script that was different, but still lined up with what was in the Star Trek Bible. It was just like, that was the best accomplishment ever. I did this and adhered to the Star Trek Bible at the same time. And that was like revered. And now it's just like, we don't want to be held to a standard anymore.
They don't want to apply themselves. They have no idea what it is to work. They think that they can do it half-assed, and they do it half-assed. And even if people are starting to tell them that it's bad, they don't care because they'll just name call and do it worse next time. But when they do it worse next time, they'll take it out on a classic part of Trek and throw that insult in their faces because only the actual fans will get it. So they put so much energy into making the fans feel upset rather than improving the quality of what they're not giving.
Well, it's funny. Project Storytime in the chat says Star Trek is a hopeful, optimistic view of the future. I'm glad drug addiction still exists. Thanks, Picard.
And they made the black woman a drug addict. Okay,
living in a trailer.
The
black woman is a drug addict living in a trailer.
In a freaking trailer.
And I'm looking at that going. When I saw that, I'm like, okay. First of all, the first season of Next Generation has an episode called Symbiosis that has both Judson Scott in it and Merrick Buttrick from Star Trek 2. Mm-hmm. And there is a planetary system. There's one planet that has medicine that another planet needs, and it turns out that the Enterprise, they don't quite understand that this one product, which is the one export this planet has it's like heroin. And they've addicted an entire planet to their one product so they can get money. And the Enterprise is like, they figure out like these people are basically drug pushers, but that's how you do a drug story in Star Trek. Mm-hmm. You make it on a planetary level, and one planet's the pusher, and the other is the buyer. And it literally in Star Trek, it's like what you couldn't come up. What is the 24th century equivalent of being a deadbeat? No, I'm literally living in a trailer and I'm addicted to drugs, and I'm the black woman. I'm like, for all of you people and your talk of being as woke or as progressive as you are, my God, what racist drivel was that? I couldn't believe it. I'm watching this going, I was offended by that.
Oh, that is when I went to go and cancel my CBS All Access membership. No lie. Because I said, you cannot freaking think that you think this is what we want to see. Is this what your opinion is of minorities? I'd never seen that treatment ever in any Star Trek that I'd ever seen.
Well,
even Code of Honor was a little, ass backwards, but it wasn't something like drug addiction. And that's when I went to cancel my membership, and that's when they gave me a month.
Lorena, you have to remember though, what they're doing is they think they can hide behind the shroud of being inclusive and being diverse, but at the same time, since they're being inclusive and diverse using those words, they can be as racist as hell, and that's what they're doing.
Well, that's what I said. But what I've said before, that's what they do. As long as they give the illusion of caring and that, oh, don't you like this representation? We gave you representation, right? That's for the same reason why I refused to review many more episodes of Batwoman season 2, for that same reason. Drug addict living in a van down by the river, really, and that's what you give us.
Even Code of Honor, when people always point to that episode as being an example of the most egregious racist, but the episode actually turns out to be a story about a matriarchy. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a twist, and people don't get there. They just see, oh, these people look like they're black tribesmen in Africa, when really the point of that episode is I think Sharina is the name of our main character's wife, and it turns out she's calling the shots. Mm-hmm. And there's a twist there and our main character it's basically in your face, dude. This woman is smarter than you. But people forget that about the episode. So even in an episode like Code of Honor, there is still something that's redeemable about it. You can't sit there and go, well, overtly, it seems to be pretty racist, because it's literally a depiction of, black tribes people.
It is so cringe, but no lie. I'm so glad I have that on VHS, because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, Gene, I see what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
It didn't go over well, but
also the black guy wants to have a white woman. I mean, there's so much stuff in that episode that's like, oh my God.
Well, once you go black, you never go back. So they're trying to convert that joke at the same time without saying it.
I mean, it's rough.
It was peak cringe. It's just like, no. I mean, I get your point, but just no, we can't do it like that.
Yeah, no. But even then, I mean, they knew that. And then there's episodes like Angel 1, where the men have to like dress in frilly outfits because the women have taken over. I'm like, that's peak cringe too. I mean,
I forgot about that one.
Wait, let's go into that, because I'm gonna switch series for a minute there. And like, how is it they can do that? But if anyone remembers Sliders, right, with O'Connell?
Yeah, of course.
Remember when but remember when they slid to the one world where the men were very rare and scarce, right?
Yeah.
They didn't tie them up into frilly stuff. No, they just put them in breeding camps. Hey,
right.
Yeah. What happened? Why can't you just look at it at a certain point? Make them an endangered species. Don't make them wear dresses and go, oh, you're mine now. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I got it. So I got to ask. So for season 1 of Deep Space Nine, Robert, if you had to pick a favorite and I really don't want to watch that episode again if I can help it, which two would those be?
Well, Move Along Home, and maybe like If Wishes Were Horses. Those are pretty not good.
Yeah.
I think that my favorite episode of the first season is Duet. And I do love the pilot. I do love the pilot, and I do love Dax, and I do love things like Past Prologue. But yeah. Those are the ones I think about the most, probably.
Steven?
For me, it's pretty much an episode that had Q in it. Tosk, the one with Tosk was a really good one.
Oh yeah, was that Captive Pursuit, or what? Which one was that?
I think so. It's pretty much the one where they couldn't really conform because of the Prime Directive, but they were still able to bend the rules without affecting the Prime Directive.
Yeah,
and even Cisco let him get away with it, because that one line was like, "Mr. Odo," he's like, "Yeah, take your time. Just take your time. Go have a sandwich. Just let him get through the turbo shafts, and you'll be good. You'll be good. It's all good, man. It's all good."
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't deal with Move Along Home. I was just like, no.
Oh, that's brutal.
I just no. But my favorite, It's honestly, it's a tie between Dax and Duet.
Yeah.
Just because they were both just, it was just really riveting, and just, the moral quandaries that were brought up, and it was riveting. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And you can see like examples of past history, kind of what they're bringing into the storyline, but they're not beating you over the head with it. And one thing that I'd like about Star Trek in general, and especially about Deep Space Nine, they weren't insulting the audience.
Nope.
No.
So if you were smart enough to put the pieces together, you could see what was going on. But if you didn't get it, you weren't gonna get shamed for it. But they aimed for a higher brand of entertainment where you had to do some thinking.
And like you said, I hadn't seen Dax in a long, long time. I don't think, not since I worked on a Star Trek experience, like back in the mid 90s.
Wow.
When I was cutting all the videos for that stuff. And I went back and watched Dax probably like 2 months ago. And I was like, wow, this is really good.
That's a later season, Mr. Londo.
This is really good. Really good.
Oh, you said the Star Trek experience. Yeah, I remember, God, I'll probably get in trouble with this. I remember the bar menu coming home with me.
Oh no, yeah.
From
Cork
Vegas,
bar?
because I think I still have it somewhere, because that was just, I had to have it.
Yeah, I worked for the company that made it. So like all the videos that you saw when you walked through I cut all those videos. I worked on that. I worked on the Star Trek experience for a year and a half. Oh, it was check this out. This is so hilarious. So I had made a compilation video for an award show, a Star Trek compilation video called Star Trek Eternal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a day to make it. And it was an early montage. I cut it in a day. Based on that, I get a phone call from this company, Landmark Entertainment. And they're like, are you the guy that made this video? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, can you come in? We'd like to interview you for a job. I was like, okay. So I go into this interview, and this company's making the $80 million Star Trek experience, Landmark Entertainment. And the guy that I'm meeting with, he goes, so you know Star Trek pretty well? And I said, yeah. I don't quite know what they're interviewing me for. And the guy goes to me, he goes, so let's say I wanted to see an episode where like a Klingon stabbed a Romulan. And I said, well, I don't know exactly if I could find you precisely what you want, but the first place I would look would be the 6th season Next Generation episode Birthright Part 2, because there's a Klingons are in there's a Romulan prison camp that's holding these Klingons, and there's somebody gets attacked with a knife, but I don't know if it's exactly what we want. And the guy I just said that right away, and the guy looks at me and goes, "Is that true? 6th season next?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're hired." and so for the next year and a half, I edited all that. So before you could even edit, I literally had to digitize in real time every episode of Star Trek that existed up through 1996. So the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. Because I had to edit everything. And that so I went to work every day for 5 months, and they paid me very well. And all I did was watch Star Trek. So I'd put in a tape, digitize it into the computer, watch the episode. I make notes like, okay, this planet. And so I had every planet from every Star Trek episode, and you could get them. You get the footage of all of it. And that's what I did for 5 months. I remember calling my mom, said, "Mom, I got a new job." And she goes, "Well, what's your job?" I'm like, "They're paying me to watch Star Trek every day." And it was the greatest job I ever had.
Oh my gosh. I'd be bragging about that all the time. Yeah, I got paid to watch Star Trek videos. Oh my gosh. That's amazing, because the Star Trek experience in Vegas, I think I saw that when I had to go out to LA to the National Society of Black Engineers conference, and I stayed an extra week to just do Hollywood stuff and drove to Vegas because I had to see the Star Trek experience. And
it was great.
It was mind-blowing.
It's so funny because it's not there anymore, but the first time we went there to see how the transporter was going to work, you'd walk into that room and you were beamed in. And even then, I was so blown away because one of the things when they designed the transporter, you know, you were in a room and the roof came up, they didn't factor in that when they pulled up the walls of the transporter and it was dark, that the air would rush in. So when you were standing in there and you were beamed, it felt like something happened to you. You didn't know that. So you felt the wind going whoosh, which was an extra added benefit. Now, every time that I did that, there was my sense of reality. I was able to suspend my disbelief. It really did feel like you got transported somewhere.
It
did, was amazing.
Because I was in there with friends and they were just like, how'd they do that? I'm like, I know I'm an engineer, but I refuse to think about that, because if I do, it's going to spoil the illusion for me. And I don't want that to flip and happen. Crispy Critters, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Thank you. He says, the prime directive became the prime suggestion too often in the Star Trek universe.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, that pesky prime directive. And Valiant Renegade, thank you so very much for the $2.99 super chat and for supporting my channel by being a member, making me want to go back and rewatch DS9, guys. I have been wearing out. I mean, I use Hulu a whole heck of a lot anyway, but when I found out Deep Space Nine was on Hulu, I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. It's just the memories of just watching what good Star Trek is.
Yeah.
It's a distant
memory.
It's a distant memory, and it's good for the soul. Just like remember what like good Star Trek is and what good writing, is. And even though the effects weren't, they were good, they were good for their time, but it wasn't always about the effects. It was about, the story.
Although when they got into Dominion War, there was some pretty impressive effects shots.
Oh yeah,
the fleet
was
shit,
sick, wasn't it?
Like in the Sacrifice of Angels. Woo, there was some great shit in there.
Oh no, Commander Ed Straker.
Ed Straker.
Straker. Oh, I've been saying it wrong for just
Commander of the Supreme Headquarters of the Alien Defense Organization.
I love that avatar. Oh my gosh. Let's see. I'm transported into rewatching TNG. Yeah, I haven't. I hope we do get Blu-rays of Deep Space Nine. That's what I've been holding out for.
Unfortunately,
it's not going to happen because of the 4.3 stuff and the way it's not kept.
Yeah, the problem is, like, I worked on the restoration of Next Generation on Blu-ray. It took 4 years to do all 178 episodes of Next Gen. And they had to go back to the negative, the original negative, and they have to basically take the show through post for each episode and scan the negative, and it's just the wherewithal and the expense. It'll probably cost between 15 to 20 million to do both Deep Space Nine and Voyager. So that's a $40 million expense. But the problem is, it's not just the money, it's who's going to do it. CBS had a team of people working for 4 years to do the Next Generation restoration. And unfortunately, streaming, while the restoration was being done for physical media, streaming started to take off. So they just didn't make the money they needed to. And ultimately, I think, look, $20 million is 2 episodes of Discovery. Why not restore, all 172 episodes of Deep Space Nine and Voyager each, and just do it all, just bang it all out?
Because I was disappointed when I was looking for Deep Space Nine on Blu-ray. I was like, I want the set. I saw TNG. I'm like, yeah, okay, but I want the DS9 set, and not, not there.
No, and there's no plans to do it. And, they keep talking about, well, there's going to be deep learning AI and they can up-res it. No, you got to go back to the negative. You have to do it correctly. And Star Trek, Marvin Rush and the people that worked on the DP, those guys did a phenomenal job of shooting that show. And Deep Space Nine looks great.
It was.
Man, if they go back in the original negative and stuff. Hey, I have to jump off this stream.
Actually, because I think we've hit our time.
Otherwise, I would stay on.
We've hit our time. No, not a problem. Robert, so glad you could join us. Rob, I keep calling you Robert. That sounds so freaking.
No, Robert's
cool.
Robert. That's
I call you Robbie.
Yeah, I'm just Rob Burnett. I use my middle name professionally because the first movie I ever worked on, they wouldn't let me use Rob Burnett because there was a producer named Rob Burnett. So they were like, can you use initials? So I used my middle name professionally. And it just kind of, so that's what I've always used professionally. But I don't walk around going, I'm Robert Meyer Burnett. No, I'm just Rob Burnett. Some people call me Bob. People who've known me. It depends what time people met me in their lives. They either call me Rob, Bob, or Robert. So either way.
Cool.
So don't call you daddy.
Oh, unless it's the right time.
Well, you just slide into my DMs, Robert. Just slide into my DMs. I'll show you some of my cheeseburger poach pictures.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. We were definitely going to bring you back so we can talk season 2 of Deep Space Nine. So, folks, start going back and watching those episodes. Start binging because this conversation is awesome. It's awesome. Please subscribe to Robert Meyer Burnett. We have his social media links in the description box. Please subscribe to Fat Steven. Please subscribe to me. And folks, thank you so much for hanging out with us, supporting us in the chat, supporting the channel with your super chats. And we will talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.
Like I said, just slide into the DMs. Really, just do it.
But be nice about it, polite.
Oh yeah, make sure you at least add an emoji of a smiley face or two. Gotta work it out.